All right, guys, so here's what we're doing. I am going to teach you how to draw a very realistic human eye. We're going to be doing eyeballs for a little bit. And actually, before we even start that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the eye before we get to drawing it. So you don't have to draw this part yet. This is just going to be on a little bit of scrap paper. I'll bring it a little closer even. There we go. So the eye is made up of a couple different parts, and I want to make sure that when I'm talking about those different areas that you know what I'm talking about. So the eyeball itself, don't worry about making perfect circles in this today. You got the whole eyeball, which is the entirety of our eye. It is literally a spherical circle shape. There's the white of the eye, which is the lighter area around it. There is the part of the eye that is usually colored. So we got the white of the eye, we got the colored part, which is called the iris. That goes in there. And then in the center, the part that is really dark, that is the pupil. So different parts of the eye. So when I'm starting to talk about all those different things, that's what I am referring to. So if I start talking about, we're going to draw the iris part of the eye, that's what I'm talking about, the colored part. If I'm talking about the pupil, you know which part I'm talking about. That's the real dark part on the inside. Other things that involve the eye, there are the little areas next to the eye that you'll see. That's the little place that's kind of like when you go and you feel like you got something like crusty, you get something stuck in your eye. That's usually right in the corners of the eye, which are kind of defined by where the eyelid goes. And the eyelid is the part that actually covers your eye. So we don't see the entire eyeball. A lot of it will end up getting covered up by the eyelid. Bam. Okay? So different things that we'll be referring to as we're working through this. Let me back it back up again. All right, so here's where the rest of you come in. I'm going to have you do, and I know we talked a little bit about eyes and expressions when we did our characters, so some of this won't be too new. What I'm going to have you do is start off by getting roughly where the eyeball is. Don't worry about if it's not a perfect circle. We're not too worried about that yet. Don't start near the top, though. Start maybe a little bit higher than halfway. So if you figure that's about the middle of the paper, start a little bit higher than that, and you're going to draw a rough circle shape. Again, don't worry if it's not perfect. Draw it kind of lightly. You can see I'm holding my pencil about the middle of it. And if you guys have a question at some point, don't be afraid to let me know. If I'm going too fast, let me know. Okay? The iris, the colored part of that, it's going to go right inside it. So again, we're going to do another kind of light circle shape. The iris never changes sizes. This iris is usually about this big compared to the white of the eye. You'll definitely have some whiteness showing around it. The pupil, however, does change sizes depending on how much light there is. So you know how if you walk outside, like if you're in a dark room and you turn on the lights in the morning, or you're in the house and it's dark and you go outside and it's bright and sunny out and you kind of have to squint for a minute, that's because our pupil, the center part of the eye, is kind of in charge of taking in some of the light. So if it's too bright outside, our pupils need to adjust to it. You'll see if you look in the mirror really close while it's dark or a little bit dark and then turn the bathroom light on, you'll see your pupil will actually shrink in size. So depending on what you're looking at, what kind of person, the light in the room, I guess, will kind of determine the pupil. The pupil is usually decently smaller. Actually, that's even a little bit big. The pupil can take over most of the iris, but not completely take it over. Okay, and if you want to kind of make that a little bit darker, And give it a little quick shading right now. Don't worry too much about that yet. You just want to get your shapes in there. Okay? When I'm drawing a face, I like to, sometimes I'll just draw the eyelids, but I find that if I do the whole eyeball, it helps for when I'm doing something more realistic. If I'm doing a cartoon character, I might not do the whole white of the eye. I might just go right to the eyelid. So on each side of the eye, not in the middle of it, just a little bit lower from that. So kind of like starting in the middle, you're going to add a little curve. It's the corner of the eye. It's not exactly a point. The other side is going to be a little bit smaller, just a hint. Just barely kind of peeking out there. And then depending on what your expression is, what you're trying to achieve with the face, we're just kind of going for a very neutral kind of eye expression. So the eyelid, which goes from the corner of the eye, this is going to cross just over the top or just underneath the top of the iris and down into your corner. And the lower part's going to go pretty close to it, almost like it's heading straight across in a way. So at this point, you can erase the top of the iris, but don't erase the top of the eyeball just yet. Kind of keep that in there. So I can actually make mine a little bit smaller. Because these are going to help us with some of the outside lines of the eye, which we'll do kind of like the outside area, and then we'll get a little bit closer and do the eyeball itself. So when it comes to the outside, there's a part of your eye where if you close your eyes, you know that your eyelid covers the whole front of your eye. But when you open your eye, that skin that is covering your eye that comes down with your eyelid has to go back somewhere. So when you open your eyes, it's almost creating, it'll sound kind of gross, but it's creating a little bit of a fold where the skin of your eyelid just kind of like tucks up a little bit. And that usually occurs right over the top of your eyeball. So by leaving that in, you can actually use that as a guide for the little wrinkle that happens. And that kind of goes from across the top of the eyeball, kind of aiming towards the corner of the eye. It doesn't quite make it all the way. And on the other side, it comes out just a little bit further past the corner of the eye. So you're creating almost this curved rainbow shape that goes over the top of the eye. And then you can get rid of the rest of the eyeball. And again, you want to make sure to really look at the person you're kind of drawing, because depending on different parts of the world, that might look a little differently. Everybody talks about how Asians have a slightly different eye, and that has a lot to do with where the eyelid is and where it kind of tucks in. The bottom part of the eye, you're not usually going to do too much around the bottom here, unless you're trying to show somebody who maybe hasn't slept for a while, and then this area under here kind of creates that little bit. People talk about how you have a circle under your eye, you get a little shadow that happens there. And in this picture, our person has just a very faint little wrinkle right on part of it. So I'm going to erase most of the bottom of the eye. I'm just going to leave this one little spot here and a little one right next to it. Just a few little wrinkles starting to show. Now the eyebrow goes over all of this. We don't have too much room for it in here, but I still want you to get a little hint of it in. The eyebrow tends to go, you're kind of on a little bit of a diagonal from the eye. You'll have part of the eyebrow starting further out than the eye, and that will go all the way across. So just kind of get a little hint of where the eyebrow will be. We won't worry too much about all the detail in that, but just enough to show that they are going to have an eyeball or an eyebrow. So now we're going to get into a little bit of shading around the eye. And again, this depends on what you're looking at, what picture you're looking at, or if you're looking at a person in front of you, where the light source is coming from. In the picture we're kind of using for this, the light source is coming off from the right side. So we're going to add a little bit of shading on this side of the eye. You're going to hold your pencil kind of down further so you can do it really lightly. Just in that little area. And just a tiny bit up into, like heading towards the eyebrow. And then same on the bottom, just a little bit of light shading on this side of the eye. Some little tissue paper I'm going to use for some blending, just to kind of smooth it out. Because again, if you're trying to do something that's a little more realistic, you're going to want to try and smooth out those pencil lines. And it's okay if you're going over like the wrinkle here and it's kind of lightening it a little bit, kind of smoothing it out, that's okay. We'll even take this a little bit along this line for the eyelid. And just to help it look a little more rounded, we're going to get a tiny bit of a very faint shadow in the corner here. Just barely there. Now this kind of shading and such, this works no matter who your subject is, what color of skin they have. If you're working with somebody who has a darker skin tone, you'll of course do some shading a little bit more extensively all over, but kind of the position of the shadows is going to be the same. Just sneaking a few more little ones into the corner here. Blend it out. And that's going to kind of take care of the outside for now. Now we're going to start getting a little bit closer. There we go. So next thing to deal with are the eyelashes. Everybody has them. So whether you are drawing a boy or a girl, or somebody in the middle, somebody who goes by they, every single human being is going to have some eyelashes. Unless, of course, there's some other reason for them not to. It is possible to have a kind of, I don't know if you call it a disease, but something like that that does make it so people don't have hair. So I can't say that every single human being will have them, but you guys get what I mean. Eyelashes do not start on the very edge of the eyelid. Then it would be like poking you in the eye. So any eyelashes you draw need to be a little bit higher than this line. And again, depending on who you're looking at, they might have shorter eyelashes, longer eyelashes, but there will always be a little hint of something. So usually up in the corner of the eye, there aren't too many larger eyelashes. You might see a couple little bits. And these will usually be in a bit of a curve feel. So these are actually going to look almost like a little hook at the moment. kind of pointing towards the outside of the eye, but then as you start getting across the middle, it'll start curving toward the right side. So you'll see a few little ones, just kind of like little lines here, and then they'll start to get a little bit longer and start to curve outward. It might be a good idea to start off with, you're just doing them like in a row. And these will start to get a little bit higher. So again, each time I'm starting one, I'm not starting it right on the eyelid. I'm starting it a little bit higher than that. And these will continue pretty much almost into the corner. And then you can start to go back and kind of fill in some of the spaces, just so it looks a little bit thicker. Don't worry if as you're drawing this, you'll see that some of my lines are kind of crisscrossing each other. Our eyelashes will do that. I know in the movies and magazines and whatnot, you'll see like perfectly inline eyelashes, but that's not usually how it works. You'll see a couple crossovers. And you can start to work these into being a little bit darker as well. You'll always want to save your eyelashes until after you're done with the shading around it, because if you try to add the shading in after you've done the eyelashes, you're going to end up blurring out your eyelashes. So just kind of keep that thought in mind. The eyelashes have to come after the shading. I'm going to make these a little bit darker. And there are usually some little eyelashes at the bottom. You might feel that it looks a little weird drawing these in, that they look a little bit odd, but when you get really close up on an eye, it does look a little bit odd. And kind of like at the top, the ones toward the outside start to get a little bit longer. The purpose of your eyelashes is to help keep bigger particles, like bigger pieces of dust, out of your eye. So when you're blinking, they're supposed to be like kind of helping to block out any big pieces of dust that might be trying to fly in there. So it might seem weird that you're going to have this divider, like they'll have this space in between the eyelashes and your eye itself, the edge of your eyelid. But if you ever get real close up, get a magnifying mirror, that's what it's going to look like. Now we're going to get in towards the details of the eye. So the corner of the eye, we're going to shade it in. And the part that is closest to the eyeball here is going to be a little bit darker. So you want to create a little bit of a darker space right next to the white of the eye. And then it'll get lighter, with a little bit of darker space right around the edge of it. So you kind of have a bit of a lighter space in the middle. The edges of the corner, and especially in toward the eye itself, will be darker. And then same on the other side, that little bit of a corner, put a little shading into. You can even use your paper towel or finger, if you're using your finger, and bring a little bit of that shading into the eye itself. Because remember that since the eye is like an actual curved shape, like a ball shape, In order to make it feel rounded, you need to add in a little bit of a shadow, a little bit of shading on the edges to help it feel round. So right in the corners, you'll blend in a little bit into the eye. Even though we call it the white of the eye, it's almost never going to be just perfect flat white. You're always going to probably have a little bit of a shadow happening from the eyelid. So we'll add just a little bit of shading on there, tiny, tiny bit across the bottom. In fact, the bottom will just, again, use just your finger or your paper towel, whatever you're using to blend, and just smooth out a little bit of that shading. So getting into the center now, iris is, or not the iris, the pupil is easy. The pupil is going to be pretty much black. So just kind of redefining the shape a little bit. And then you're going to want to go in pretty dark. Fill that whole thing in. Okay? Super, super dark. Don't be afraid to go really dark on that area. So now we're getting to the crazy part. If you really want to like blow your mind, look up pictures of close-ups of a human eye. There is so much detail that goes into the iris. It's incredible. Your eye is never just like one color. There's all sorts of lights and darks that will happen in it, especially if you find someone who's got like, look up hazel eyes. Hazel eyes are when they're kind of green, but also kind of brown. And when you look at them, they have all sorts of different colors in them. Got a question? I saw a hand pop. I like drawing all sorts of different things. I think what I turn to the most when I draw is drawing characters. So like drawing people, whether that means head to toe, whether that means just like their faces. Especially my style tends to be a little bit more cartoonish, so usually I end up going with that. I did do an assignment in college once where I did a extreme close-up on my own eyes, and I had my face partially covered, like you were trying to hide from a scary movie, but you're peeking through your fingers at the same time so I could draw the eyes. And I really like that piece. I think I still have it in my house somewhere. So for the iris, for the one that we're looking at anyway, the edge of the iris is pretty dark. There's almost like a little band that goes all the way around it. From one side to the other, like a ring. And you'll get a little bit of the shadow happening at the top. So you can kind of continue that idea of the ring across there, even though it's not part of that circle. And this part's going to be pretty dark. Maybe not quite as dark as the iris, the pupil, sorry. See, it would help if I could keep them straight too. But this part's definitely going to be the darker area on our iris. Part of what got me into drawing cartoon characters, especially anime characters, was they can put a lot of expression and details into the eye, usually using highlighted areas where the light is reflecting off the eye. But that was something that really got me into it, was adding some detail into the eye. American cartoons don't do it nearly as much unless they're trying to look like a Japanese cartoon. All right, so we'll keep that pretty dark. Still going to blend it in, and I'm going to be careful not to blend it outwards into the white of the eye, but I am going to let it kind of smear a little bit to the inside. Because ultimately, the whole inside of this is going to get a little bit of shading. So in fact, what we can do is, after blending in that darker ring, just go ahead and bring some of that all the way into the iris, touching the pupil. And as you're blending it, try to go, you can see I'm kind of going in a rounded motion. That'll help to keep the whole feeling of being a rounded eye if you're shading in a curved motion, instead of just going like straight back and forth across. Try to go around as much as you can. Man, my voice sounds rough today. I need to hydrate. Better. All right, so getting in really close now. There is usually an area just outside of the pupil, or if you're looking at it, it's almost looking like, what's the best way to put it? Come back here, scrap paper. It's almost looking like not quite a sun idea, but an irregular kind of design that's going around it. It's kind of subtle, so we're going to be careful about not pressing too hard on it. But if you kind of get in mind roughly an area that goes around the pupil, we're then going to do little bits of kind of an up and down scribble motion. So you're always aiming towards the middle, but you're kind of going back and forth, kind of lightly, kind of holding my pencil near the middle so it goes lightly. Doing a little bit of a scribble up and down. And once you've gone around it once, kind of go around it again. Make it a little bit bigger so now it's almost touching the pupil a couple of times, so that this outside edge still has a little more shading to it, but there's a little bit happening in the middle. And then going in with your blending. And now this time, since we want to keep that idea, that little bit of a jagged idea, I'm going back and forth across my pencil in the same direction. So instead of doing a circle this time, I'm going in and out towards the pupil. So you see, it's a little bit, you can just barely see it, but it does give you a little bit of a sense that there's a little something more there. That's good. We're going to have a little bit of that kind of happening near the outside, just a hint of it. So going from that dark area, you're kind of drawing some long and short lines. Again, always pointing toward the middle. Almost like if this was a sun, it almost looks like little bits of grass that are trying to grow towards the sun. And again, I'm not drawing them too dark. I'm still holding my pencil in the middle. Now, if we were to use color with this, you'd still be doing the same method. You'd be looking at your eye, looking for that dark ring around it, looking for that inside ring. But instead of using a pencil, you would be using different colors. So instead of shading in the eye with just our pencil, you would be going in with a certain color, whether that was blue or brown or green. Bring that in a bit too. And that's about it. So this is roughly what you are turning in. A little bit of some details on the outside to show off the shape of the face around the eye, and then really focusing in on those inside details. I am going to post this recording so that you guys will have a chance to rewatch it if you need to, or check back in on it again later. What we're going to be working on Thursday and Friday, so I don't want you to start it just yet, but just to have it in your mind, is you are going to be picking out the eye of an animal that we're going to be drawing. So you may want to start thinking of something, maybe pull up some pictures. Don't worry about starting it just yet. There's a few things that I want to talk about before getting started. But if you want to do some hunting online to start finding a nice picture of an animal to use, that might be a good idea. You can pick any animal you like. If you want to do a fish eye, if you want to do a cat eye, a snake eye, bird eye, pick your favorite animal, whatever it is, and you're going to want to try to find a picture that has a really nice close-up. Like look up close-up of horse eye and see if you can have something that is really close up to show all those cool details. And we're going to be talking about drawing those and adding color and all sorts of stuff. But there's our little tutorial for the eye for today.